Hey, you feel that? You are now tuned into You Feel That with Bryce the Third. Yo, and welcome to another episode of You Feel That with Bryce the Third, the best podcast there is for high-level entrepreneurs looking to learn how to master their emotions. Here's where we learn to become compassionate, understanding servant leaders, one episode at a time. The big question is this: how do I, as an ambitious entrepreneur, learn to master my emotions in a way that allows me to continuously show up and do the next scary thing that could potentially take my career and life to the next level? I am, of course, your host, Bryce the Third. And today is pretty damn special. Why? Because every day is pretty damn special. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's helping me to kind of organize my efforts around my personal entrepreneurship, around my personal business and my creative exploits. And I was telling her about some of the struggles that I have around my podcast, some of the things that I'm looking to break past. And as you all know, if you are avid listeners to the podcast, there's been some studio changes. I'm no longer in the studio that I was in. I'm working to build a different space. And there's also just the development of, why I'm showing up. And throughout my experience in life, especially in the creative field, I would see people take time off. And it's like, oh, I got to take time off and then I'll be back. And when I get back, I'll be more equipped, or I'm coming back and I'm relaunching, or I'm coming back and I'm woo. But every time I would see that, it would seem as if the momentum is lost. So you all know here that I am a big champion of continuing to show up, consistency over and over and over again. And I think that's important. I think also that the process of asking why I'm showing up is important too. And so I think one of the last times we came together, I was telling you about the meditation retreat that I was embarking upon. It was a 7-day silent meditation retreat and learning to practice Vipassana meditation. And it really gave me a different outlook on a lot of the things that I've been doing, a lot of the ways that I've been showing up, and a lot of my why as to why it is that I do what I do. I know that I have been at the forefront of a lot of my exploits. Like Bryce the Third is at the forefront. And after this meditation retreat, I kind of feel like, how important am I? And this is not to say that I'm not important, like, oh, I ain't shit. But it's kind of like a correction, kind of like pointing out what all I was being fueled by. And I think a lot of what I've been fueled by is ego. I like to be on your lips. I like to be who it is that you talk about. I like for people to mention Bryce the Third. I like to be on stage. And these things are good, but they can't be the reason why I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing. And so I show up for this podcast to create a space where we can create community around this thing that I found is important to talk about, which is emotional wellness when it comes to building stuff. As creatives, we can tend to have driven behavior, and we can tend to lock into that driven behavior and not give ourselves slack or not give ourselves compassion and understanding. And so I wanted a space where I can talk about, as well as have guests on that can talk about how it is that they maintain and grow and develop spiritual, mental, and emotional tools as entrepreneurs, as creatives, because I saw a pocket of need. And so this is community driven. And I, after coming back and like not being able to pull upon ego, because ego was kind of gone, or at least had been kind of broken, I had to figure out, and I'm continuing to figure out, like, how to resituate how I show up and what is important to me. And so this is where that asking why, along with the consistency. So I didn't show up last week with a podcast episode, and I'm asking myself what I want to do with this podcast, and how do I want to continue to show up. I don't want to continue to do the same thing over and over again. And it's like, I also don't want to like just stop. You know, I know we got momentum here, and I know we're getting to know each other. This is the very beginning still to me, even though like this is like episode 40 something. We are still beginning, and such is life. We can often think that if I show up, and I've showed up 50 times, like everybody knows me, and this is the process, and I'm stuck in my ways. And we all know entrepreneurship isn't like that. You know, the people who get stuck in their ways die. We have to pivot. We have to shift. But like emotionally, we're not in stasis. You know, if we're in stasis, if we're being still emotionally, if we're not allowing for the feedback to give us data that allows for us to grow in alignment with who it is that we're being called to versus who it is that, okay, I think that these people think that I'm this, so let me continue to shift and mold myself so that I show up like this, and let me not show up unless I can show up like this, and let me, you know, I show up whenever I feel like I can be like this. I think it's important not only for me to talk about and bring you all people who can talk about their process of being compassionate and understanding with their process, but it's important for me to show up and be transparent and give you the back curtain look at, you know, how it is that I'm able to show up. Because I know I've said often, and I'll say it over and over and over again, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I just keep showing up, right? And then in showing up, like, I learn more. And then I learn more about why it is I want to show up, and I learn more about how to show up, and I learn more of, you know, the technical side of showing up. And so, but it hasn't happened like that. It hasn't happened super simply. And sometimes we don't even know what questions to ask unless we show up. So what I've learned is that, and what I find is important, is that, like, showing up, like, not stopping, not stopping. And even with this, something that my friend told me is that, like, yo, like, don't go so crazy on the editing. And, like, you know, I throw my thing in an editor and I'll edit up an episode because I want it to, you know, I want it to be straight to the point. I want you to be hit upside the head with all of the information and all of the tools, and not get so, you know, caught up in my ums and buts and ha's and me working through my mind to figure out what I'm going to say when I'm going to say it, especially on my solo episodes. But she was like, look, people want that open, honest, transparent you. So give them that. So this is, you know, this is scary for me, and I'm going to do it because I think it's important for you to see in real time what it looks like for a person to be figuring it out. And so right now I'm constructing my studio. I'm in my new crib. My studio is in a basement. I got soundproof it and get it all together and make it look aesthetically pleasing to continue to up the quality of this show as well as other things that I want to do. And I'm going to bring you all along for the process. I also, like, don't want to stop. Once again, this could be a thing where it's like, let me just chill. Let me put a halt on things. And then I'll come back when I feel like I can show up like I've established with people that this is how I show up. But no, like, how I show up, like, this is how I show up. I show up authentic. And I encourage you to show up authentic. Show us your struggles. Show us your pain, your scars, as well as your joys and triumphs. I think these days we get way too many joys and triumphs, and we get way too many, like, look, this is what I do, and I just built $1 million empire and blah, blah, blah. And then that comparison thing for people who are in the process of building things happen, and they look and it's like, look, I'm not there. Like, where I'm at, I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what it is even the fuck I'm doing. So can you show me something real? And there's just not a lot of people who are willing to, like, offer up the realness and authenticity of the process on a platter. So I think I want to do that. I think this is a space to do that as we continue to flesh out, like, these super cool guests. I got somebody lined up tomorrow to interview, and this person is a person who I read her book years back, and it made a huge impact on me, and it even transferred into how it is that I coach. And then recently, earlier this year, I got super inquisitive about like, what is this person doing? I looked them up and they were doing some coaching. And so I ended up getting in touch with her, and then I entered into one of their courses, which was led by them. And, you know, long story short, like, they'll be on a podcast tomorrow, and I'm super excited about that. And I'm super excited about that episode when it drops for you. And we got more guests like that. I got more heavy hitters that I'm pulling in, because I want you all to get the tools from people who are actually putting these things to use, and like are building things, and are building creative empires, and are building substantial financial income from their creative exploits, and are staying emotionally well in the process, or staying spiritually fit in the process, are building up being a good person in the process. Because that's what's important to me. Like, the money is important, yes, because the money is going to allow for me to feed my family and feed myself, and invest in my own creative exploits, and invest in my own music career, and be able to go to the mountains for a couple of months to write a book if I want to, right? But beyond that, like, I don't need nothing crazy. I don't need, you know, I'll get a Tesla, but, you know, I won't need it. Like, I just need a car to get me from point A to point B. And the more I've been thinking about it, like, I'd be in a lot of places that maybe I wouldn't even want to park my Tesla, you know? So it's like, money for me is empowerment. And so, yes, money is important, especially as creatives, as business owners. Money is important. But I think what's most important is our emotional wellness, is our spiritual wellness. Because if we don't have that, but we got all the money in the world, like, money can't buy wellness. And what I've learned is that what we build at any level of our lives just gets amplified by the resources that we gain as we move forward. So if we build our emotional, spiritual, and mental wellness process right now, if we're not exactly where we want to be, as we continue to build towards where we want to be, we'll have that set. It's just like, I'm working with a personal finance coach to get my money in order, and I'm reading this book this year recommended called Millionaire Mindset by Chris Hogan. And one thing he had shared that really stuck with me is, like, you know, we have this magical thing that we feel that one day I won't never have to think about money. And it's like, no, you're going to always have to think about money. So you might as well think about money now. It's about learning how to have fun with the process, learning how to be intrigued and inquisitive about the process, learning how to continuously stay curious about the process. But you're going to always have to think about money. There'll never be a day where it's like, oh, I got so much money, I don't even got to think about it. Like, if you ever get to that point, it will be because you thought about money to begin with. So, you know, wherever we're at right now, we need this process, and this process will continue to expand and grow as we grow, right? So I think those are the things that were on my heart to share today. The show is about to switch up a tad. Well, it's going to continue to grow. And I thank you all for being patient and understanding that I skipped a week, because that's not something that I take lightly. Somebody who shows up continuously over and over again, it just, when things start to feel like a bane, and it feels like a weight lifted off my shoulders when I give myself a break and allow myself not to show up for a week, then it's like, okay, there's something amiss. There's something in this process that needs to be revisited, and there's some whys that need to be asked. You know, I'm not big on taking breaks, because I know the importance of continuing to show up. Like, if I think about my personal recovery journey, you know, from alcohol and drugs, there's things, I'm coming up on my 9th year, and there's things that I'm discovering about, you know, meditation, where it's like, yo, I've been meditating for a minute. I didn't have my practice for a minute, but it's like, because I continue to show up, even though it sounds like boring, like you continue to meditate and you continue to show up and do the same thing, it's not the same thing. Because the more that we show up, the more we have a distinct experience, and the more we have experience, the more we change, and the more we change, the more we have different experience. So it's not the same thing. Even though we're saying the same word, meditation, over years, it is not the same thing. So podcasts, we can say the same thing. I'm telling people about my podcast, you know, 50, 100, 200, 300 episodes in. Yeah, I got a podcast. Yeah, I got a podcast. And I can tend as a creative to look at it through the eyes of the people that I'm sharing this with, like, oh, you're probably just hearing me say podcast for the 300th time. But it's like, no, this is not the same thing. This thing is growing. This thing is developing. The mission statement is continuing to change. I'm continuing to find out more about why this is important, why this platform is important, and why I've been called to this work. So this is not the same thing, and this show will not continue to be the same. So I commend you all who have been here from the jump. Shout out to Kimberly Freeman too. I definitely want to shout her out. When I was out in Cali, she actually reached out because she's out there, and I needed a ride to the airport. And this is a podcast listener who's been listening from the jump. And she pulled up on me and she rode me to Oakland Airport and she gave me a birthday card, and I was so elated to actually talk to her and, you know, get a hug. And that shows me the power of this podcast, where it's like, here goes a person I've never met in my life, like in person, but because they listen to the podcast and I happen to be in her city, she pulled up on me. And, you know, she pulled up on me with snacks. She gave me like snacks, dehydrated strawberries that I could eat on the plane. And I was so elated, and it's kind of just one of those things where it's like, wow, this is beautiful. This would never happen. This community would never exist had I had not created this platform. So I'm gonna continue to show up over and over again. And, you know, sometimes maybe we'll stop to ask why, you know, and in those periods, I appreciate your patience and your listenership. Like, if you could share this podcast with one or two people, like that's the biggest ask that I have. Like, the more people we get to listen to this thing, the more we spread this good energy, the more we spread the energy of emotional, mental, and spiritual wellness in the midst of our creative endeavors, the more we spread the energy of empowerment and servant leadership. And that's enough. That's enough. You know, I usually got calls to action at the end of the show, but those are finna change. You can go buy my book. It's on Amazon, The Handbook by Bryce III. But I think the biggest call to action for this episode is share this episode with one person, because we need to build this community. This isn't me. This isn't about me. This isn't Bryce III. Like, this is us. You know, this is us. This is the person out looking to create cool stuff and feed their family and feed themselves off of the ideas that they're being called to create, and keeping an emotional, spiritual, and mental wellness about themselves in that process, not having to, you know, I have to grind, I have to hustle, I have to negate the importance of my wellness so that I can make this thing happen, and one day I'll be able to sit down and enjoy it all. No, this is about learning what it is that we need, learning how to be patient with ourselves and compassionate with ourselves as we build these things out, and building not only our processes and our businesses and our creative endeavors, but also building our wellness into it as we do it, so we can live a fulfilled life. And when we live a fulfilled life, other people see us and they wonder how we did it, and they take notes. You know, being a father and having kids, that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. Is like, kids listen to 10% of what you say and 90% of who you are, right? So we can say all the words. I can come on this podcast and say all the words and give you all the tools. But if I'm not practicing it, the energy is not going to vibrate like it is when I'm being open, honest, and transparent about my personal practice, you know? But me sharing my personal practice is not so that you can admire Bryce III, so that you could tap in with Bryce III. It is, one, to build a relationship with you for sure, but two, and I think the most important, is so that you build a relationship with you, that you see in me and my process some of the things that you've experienced, and that you are able to continue pushing. And I think that's the most important things about this show, is that you feel equipped to be empowered, that you feel equipped to pursue your endeavors, that you feel equipped to show up in your life however it is that you feel that you need to show up, with the capacity that you need to show up. And I'm going to continue to do it out loud so that you can see what it look like. And I'm not editing this episode. Y'all going to get all of this, every single piece of it. And I appreciate this. I appreciate you all. I appreciate this show. I appreciate the process of learning how to create a show. I appreciate the shows that have blossomed from this show. I don't know if you all have listened. I'll put a link in the show notes. There's a show that I'm a host of called Rise, Recover, Live, the podcast with the Phoenix. And there we talk about recovery stories. And like, it's exclusively, that's the word that I was looking for. It's exclusively recovery based. And the conversations we've had there have been invaluable. But one thing my friend had pointed out was that, like, that show wouldn't have been able to be in existence had it not been for the learning process that this show has allowed for me to learn, the capacity I've been able to build from starting this show from scratch and Googling stuff and taking courses and figuring out how to run a podcast. Like, my expertise from that, which is crazy thinking expertise. Like, I wasn't an expert. I was just somebody who wanted to do a thing and just started Googling it and doing it. And in that process, now if somebody came to me and asked me, how do I start a podcast? I could walk them through from step A to step Z because I've done it. And so that's the beauty in showing up, and the beauty in showing up consistently, and the beauty in showing up consistently and asking, why am I showing up as you're showing up? And the importance of showing up for yourself, and the importance of continuing to do it, and the importance of showing the whole process. There's nothing to hide. Let's be transparent, open, and honest, because this is what will cause us to make change. So with all that said, that's all I got for you today. Y'all know the deal. If you hop over to Apple Podcasts, leave me a rating and review. That'll be out cold, especially one of the little paragraph rating and reviews. People see that paragraph and be like, this sounds like a show I want to listen to, because other people are so elated about the show that they will leave a podcast paragraph. Yeah, that's one of them PPs, podcast paragraphs. And yeah, as always, be intentional, love on each other, and have compassion for your process. I will see you next time on You Feel That? With Bryce the Third.